These murders obtained national attention and news coverage then, and they still do today. So it is worth spending some time to show you that Patricia Colombo spent 8 months planning the murder of her family.
And for her to stand over him and stab him 100 times, there's no possible way that somebody that could plan such a vicious murder for 8 months and then go through with it in such a horrific manner. She got 300-year sentences for a 1,000-year sentence. I think she should do at least half of her sentence, and that would be fair.
And we are about to watch the parole hearing out of the state of Illinois for a family annihilator that probably most of you have never heard of. You see, it was back on May 4th of 1976 when Patricia, or Patty, who was 19 years old, went with her boyfriend Frank DeLuca, who was 39 years old, and murdered her father, her mother, and her 13-year-old brother. And it wasn't just go in there, shoot them, and leave. It was a brutal murder, over 100 stab wounds on some of the victims. And, well, we'll get into that in a bit. Now, it actually seems, you might hear at this at first glance and say, well, surely it was the 39-year-old's fault. But a lot of this will come down to her, Patty, the 19-year-old, as being the manipulative one, the one that was planning this for up to 6 months before committing the vicious crime. Now, I digress. All of this is going to come out in the parole hearing. But before we watch her 2026 parole hearing, we are going to do my favorite thing and take a flashback to the past, to her November 21, 2024 hearing. Yes, we have covered her previous hearing. Now, some of you might remember, fewer than 15% of my subscribers have seen it. Let's thank the YouTube algorithm for that. But if you've already seen it, you can feel free to skip ahead to hearing number 2. Now, in between, I will share some context, and I'll also read your comments from that 2024 hearing. Now, with that, let's jump in.
Okay, Mr. Stone, you want to make your presentation?
Before I begin, thank you. Before I begin, I want to give you a message from Patricia Colombo. She asked that I say this before presenting information on her behalf. She says she wants to tell the board, all of you, thank you for releasing Katrina Giles. And she said that she was so grateful that Katrina got to die at home. While we are all saddened by her death, we are also grateful, says Ms. Colombo, for the board showing mercy to Ms. Giles. So thank you for that. We've already talked about the group letter from the Women's Justice Institute and Ascend Life and the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence. There are many people here on behalf of Patricia who I'd like to stand up just to have you recognize the wealth of people who care about and support Ms. Colombo. Thank you. In front of you is a maze that was constructed by Ms. Colombo. It is a maze that she calls a maze of the path of those involved in domestic violence. If you take a close look at the maze, you'll see it's an intricate, confusing network of walls or hedge pathways, a physical structure which is not easy to get lost in. Thank you. Which is easy to get lost in. These are Ms. Colombo's words for an art project that she created. The maze is my art depiction of how to see the invisible and visible walls of domestic violence. I'm quoting Ms. Colombo. The beginning of most relationships are welcoming, even inviting. sadly, most of us miss the red flags, the warning signs. And we begin our journey through the maze of domestic violence in that fog. The emotion and physical twists and turns and dead ends, the grave and end result of many caught in the maze of domestic violence. Sometimes it's the victim, sometimes it's the abuser, sometimes it's innocence along the way. The exit to the maze is hidden in the far corner, out of sight, difficult to get into, difficult to find. But there is hope, writes Ms. Colombo. On the other side of the maze, there's something that I call the tribe. The tribe being helpers, people who care, people like St. Leonard's House. On the other side of the maze, there is a shining light that lights on the pitfalls and needs all those lost in the maze, help to change the laws, help to provide preventive and aftercare and education and programming. And she concludes by saying, and the construction of that piece of art, thank you, Women's Justice Institute, Ascend Justice, the Illinois Prison Project, for all that you do. Together with the Tribe for Change, you are a blessing. I show you that piece of art because it is instructive. You know the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. This piece of art, constructed by this incredible woman, tells her story in art. It shows how she was lost. It shows how she was abused, starting at age 7, sexually abused for years. And then with a person who paid her attention, a 36-year-old pharmacist in the pharmacy where she worked, began to have a sexual relationship with her, groomed her, abused her, had her move into his house with his wife, where the two of them sexually shared this child. And then trafficked her. This is the miswrouting of a child. It is the twisting and turning and harming forever a child. And that is who Ms. Colombo was when she committed this horrible crime with her abuser, DeLuca. I want to introduce you to Dr. Carla Fisher, who's sitting to my right. Ms. Fisher will talk about her experiences with Ms. Colombo, and then I'll give a brief summary for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that you have my report, which is quite lengthy, and I won't take up your time by summarizing it in any meaningful way. I know you know that I am a domestic violence expert. I am trained as a research psychologist and a lawyer, and I have been working on cases like Trish Colombo's and other cases that involve domestic violence, trying to understand the connection between gender-based violence and the perpetration of crimes for my entire career. I've done a lot of that in academia, teaching, research, going to conferences, teaching other people. But a lot of what I have learned about the pathway between gender-based violence and criminal conduct has been based upon working on about 300 cases by now in the last 30 years. I think there's no other way to learn than to have experience with a population that we frankly don't know much about, at least in terms of academic resources. So that's sort of who I am. I spent quite a bit of time with Trish, the better part of 2 working days earlier this year, maybe March, I think it might have been early May. I spent about 10 hours with her talking with her about her history in childhood and her history with Mr. DeLuca. I also did something that I haven't ever done before in a case, even though I've worked on plenty of post-conviction cases, which is to gather two groups of women. One group was inside Logan, and the other group was formerly incarcerated women and other people from the community who had worked with Trish to understand the way in which Trish has been rehabilitated from her history of domestic violence, to understand more deeply the impact she's had on other people, as I think everybody recognizes she has had a huge effect on other people. My task was really to kind of try to get more into the ways that she has helped other people and what that means for her own rehabilitation. And that, in fact, was the focus group information is collated in my report. I probably could have written a report 3 times that size on the ways that people told me that Trish had helped them in prison. And I can share some of that with you if you like. I want to say that you don't need me to repeat her history of violence. Mr. Stone has referred to some of it, but I do want to say that I think the way I have come to understand what happened, the way that the connection between what happened to her, especially with Frank DeLuca, and the crime itself, is that if you distill it down to its essence, I think that Frank DeLuca used a number of coercive tactics that domestic violence offenders often use as a way to both coerce her into the relationship, coerce her into sex she didn't want. And I'm not saying she was coerced into the crimes itself. She doesn't have enough of a memory of the crimes for me to make a firm opinion about that. But there is a connection. It's not irrelevant that this crime was committed with Frank. He wasn't irrelevant. And so anyway, let me leave that aside for a minute. But I think that the other important thing to understand about her rehabilitation is it's not just that she's changed as a person, but what she has been able to do to help other women change. And the specific types of change that the women either on the inside and also on the outside spoke to, one of the consistent themes was that she encourages others to do better. She encourages others to not only make better choices and to understand their emotions better, but there's been a ripple effect of her helping other people who have then been inspired indeed to help other people, sort of like dropping a pebble in a pond. I think those ripples go very far. And when I asked people about the kinds of change that she had promoted, one of the things that came through loud and clear is that she has been a person for whom they can trust with their own traumas. She has, in effect, become a peer trauma counselor while she's been at both Dwight and Logan, and had the ability, she has sort of become full circle. From when she went into prison, she was a woman who had a lot of secrets. Her life had been defined by secrets, and her secrets had cost her a lot. And now she has become the kind of person that other people can tell their secrets to. She is a listening ear for other women to talk about the trauma they went through. She's a support to help them think about their emotional responses to what happened and the behavioral choices they can make. And she reinforces positive behaviors and positive emotional reactions from them. She teaches people how to be different. And I suppose that's pretty much the best definition of rehabilitation that I can think of. I will close just by saying that I think it's very clear that Trish deserves parole. She's earned parole. But I also think that the benefit for her parole is not just for her. It is for people out in the community. We don't have a wealth of people who can do what she can do. We don't have a wealth of people who can talk to youth about trauma, adults who can talk to youth about trauma. We don't have people who have the skills she has to be able to make change in our community. And that's exactly what she will go out and do if she is paroled. Any organization, any community would be happy to have a person who's become what she's become, who can help people with their trauma and perhaps prevent other people from going to prison. Thank you.
I want to end my conversation with you all about redemption. You know, as a society, on Fridays, our Muslim friends go to the mosque and talk about redemption. On Saturdays, my family goes to a synagogue and talks about redemption. On Sundays, all across America, Christians go to churches and talk about redemption. It is sewn into the American culture that people can be redeemed. Illinois law recently created a juvenile parole act. You all just heard 2 cases involving juvenile parole, and you hear probably dozens of others throughout your lives as members of this board. Redemption is real and should be honored by this board. It is not Friday in a mosque or Saturday in a synagogue or Sunday in a church. It is Thursday in a parole board hearing. But redemption is very much the issue. Let us practice what we preach. Patricia Colombo, now 68 years old, has led an adult life in prison. She has spent that time loving her God, asking not for forgiveness, but rather working for change, for growth, for health, and maybe most of all, for her dedication to others in need of those same values. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, to grant Patricia Colombo parole. Nothing that I say today will deprecate, devalue, or dismiss the tragedy of the death of her family at her hand. Nothing I could say to these gentlemen would soothe their pain, their sorrow, their loss, even their anger. But we have a duty to understand that people change, that they can be redeemed. We have a plan. Patricia has a life, and we ask you to honor redemption. Parole her. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to open it up for questions for Mr. Stone and Dr. Fisher. And then after we're done with that, we'll let the opposition testify and then ask them for questions. So anybody have any questions at this time? Mr. Grubbs.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I guess what I would like to hear, I've heard of your argument of redemption, but I've also heard that testimony that Ms. Colombo can't remember what occurred regarding this crime. Her statements in the past have been vague regarding it, though there's detailed information regarding a detailed murder plot. And my question goes to accountability, responsibility, and remorse, which I don't see really contained in this petition. And since I didn't get to speak with Ms. Colombo, I would like your perspective on the level of accountability, responsibility, and remorse she takes for the crime that she committed.
I think that it's very clearly stated in my report that Trish says she takes full responsibility for the murders. To her, it doesn't matter what happened because she was there. And not only was she there, but whatever the circumstances that happened before that led her there and that led Frank there, she believes that it would never have happened. But for her, and for her relationship with Frank. I think in my work with her, her expressions of remorse and grief over the loss of her family were very profound. And I think that in her understanding of what it meant for her to take responsibility was for her to say, that I am responsible for all these crimes because they never would have happened but for me. Now, on the issue of memory is a tricky thing. There's a difference between normal memories and traumatic memories. And traumatic memories, which are things that events that happened when someone was really terrified, which is what she described to me in the events leading up to the crime, you would expect somebody to have difficulty with their memory for the crime if it was traumatizing to them at the time. So I see her memory for events as distinct from her ability to take accountability and responsibility and have remorse and grieve her family. Those are two different things.
I also want to add that in speaking with her, she knew that she was sexually abused between the ages of 7 and 12, but because of the trauma of it, she couldn't recall exactly what happened to her because it was such a horrible thing that happened. And I liken that to the same way that she dealt with the death of her family. She was there, she experienced it. She says she was in a dark place and went off a cliff from there and doesn't recall because, again, it was a very traumatizing event. And that's to live with yourself after all of that. You're in a safer place not having recall of those horrible events.
May I speak to that? I completely agree with what you just said. In my experience, when children are traumatized and I saw the same kind of memory issues that you saw when I talked to her about these events, it's more likely in my experience that you see the same pattern of memory loss in an adult trauma. So to me, that speaks to her memory loss is not what some people call convenient for around the circumstances of the crime, but it's consistent with traumatic memory in childhood and traumatic memory and the traumatic memories from adulthood too.
Taking it for a moment outside of a criminal case and reasonable skepticism of the defendant's memory, I must tell you that as a lawyer, I have represented veterans from Vietnam, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, who have, unrelated to any crime, rather related to service to this country, a traumatic memory loss that is real, that is documented, that is studied by doctors at the VA. And I have no doubt and hope that you all understand that the memory loss that you're seeing experienced by Ms. Colombo is very much akin to the memory loss of combat veterans. We close our mind off to things we cannot understand or deal with. And it comes to the skeptic as lack of responsibility. But I think that's unfair, unwise, and untrue.
Mr. Ronas.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the report, extensive report that you created, Dr. Fisher. I do have a couple questions as it relates to assessment tools that I didn't see in the report. For example, personality functioning and risk for violence. I just want to inquire or ask a question as to why those weren't conducted and if that has any relevance as it relates to decision-making for you.
The first one was personality assessment and the second one was risk assessment?
Risk for violence.
Yes. I'm not a clinical psychologist, and I'm not trained in those specific aspects. That would come under the heading of a clinical workup, although I think risk assessment is a specific area that's actually a subset of clinical work. I don't think all clinical psychologists would be qualified to do a risk assessment. So in other words, those are not in my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is understanding how a history of violence impacts someone's behavior, thoughts, and emotions.
Understood. Would you think there's a value to this testing based on your expertise and experience in the field of domestic violence? Because I see you're operating from a domestic violence framework. Would that be something that you think warrants or has a value at this juncture?
I think that a personality assessment would provide not a lot of, I mean, you sort of see who she is in what she has done the last 48 years in prison. We have a lot of information about that. I don't think a personality assessment would necessarily give you greater information than what you already know. I would be shocked by what I know about risk assessment if Ms. Colombo came up as anything other than low risk. I can't imagine what would elevate her out of a low risk category based upon, again, the last 48 years.
Okay, because I know we completed a YASI, and the YASI was done, of course, in 2017, I believe our date has. And they did the risk level was overall high. She was moderate in the other areas.
When was it done?
2017.
Okay.
Okay, so there's some years there, but that's the only documentation we have. I didn't see in Ohio either, because typically that's sometimes done with an institution. So I'm looking at assessments to provide additional information, but I appreciate your response on that. Thank you.
I think you can also rely on the fact that the correctional facility, Logan, has placed her at a low risk, given her an A grade, and allows her moderate freedom within the institution. If they thought she was a high risk, none of that would be present in her housing portfolio.
So I'll make a statement to that. I think in our structured environments, that's a contributing factor, correct? And my assessment need is to better understand her response or coping mechanisms that she will embrace when she returns to community. So assessments provide some diagnosis, some information, and I see her demonstrated efforts. I'm not taking anything away from her rehabilitative response within the institution, but as we know, research indicates on assessments that they give us additional information. So that's why I asked the question, but I'm not taking away her demonstrated behaviors to show within this confined area that she has been responsive, a self-advocate, a contributor. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Julie?
I could. Sure. So I'm familiar with a lot of the connections between abuse and violence. So for example, if a woman were to attack her abuser in a moment of vulnerability, unable to do so in a moment of conflict, as well as the fact that relationships are more often criminogenic than protective in the lives of women, that often their criminal justice involvement stems from relationships, which it sounds like is what's being implied here, that Mr. DeLuca, as you stated, was not irrelevant in this situation. It does sound from the evidence that there was some planning and initiation of the triple homicide that took place over a great period of time that did occur independently of DeLuca. I'm wondering if she was able to speak to any recollections of that planning, and if there is any link between my interpretation of the report was that it was kind of solely focused on her experiences with victimization and healing from that victimization, but there wasn't a great connection to even the planning of the offense, and I welcome any comment.
I did not speak with her extensively, if at all, about the planning of the crimes. She had zero memory of what she had, because that comes from information that other witnesses said, right? As well as the statements that she gave to police initially after the events. If I got that right, I didn't have the original documents. I didn't have access to the original documents, but is my assumption about that right?
I believe she gave some statements, at least regarding the nature of her relations with the two individuals that she had tried to contract with for the homicide. I believe at the time she had some recollections. I'm not sure if she's spoken, and I welcome if Ms. Schaffner has anything as well in terms of recollection of the planning.
The information I have related to the recollection of the crime come from the documentation. She did feel strongly that that she did not initially solicit them to kill her parents. That they provided almost the motive by telling her that her dad was going to kill Frank DeLuca, and that they needed to do something to stop the dad. And that was the motive for them going to the house, was to try to stop the dad. That was the understanding, that was what was communicated during the interview. With respect to the planning, the record is pretty clear that she provided them with the schedules of their family and also with a scheme of the house, so they know how to get in and out. I don't think she saw herself actually going there at the time she gave them this information, but that was all pretty much in the record.
Any other questions? Mr. Heaton?
Do you have any information from any of your contact with Ms. Colombo about whether she stood to gain in a financial way from these crimes by getting proceeds of her life insurance policy or to become the owner of the family property?
I don't have any information about that.
Well, I never asked about that. I know of no evidence of that. And while I understand its interest, I'm here today begging for parole 48 years later to a woman who was not a 19-year-old victim of sexual trafficking, but a woman who seeks to help others and re-enter society through Grace House.
I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Seeing none, I will now go to the opposition. So you've already been sworn, so make a statement to identify who you are and how you're related to this case and make your presentation.
Thank you. In light of the discussion today, I've had previous information that's been provided to the board. So with your permission, I have a statement that I would like to go over and reiterate
Go
some
ahead.
important information.
And if you can introduce yourself as well.
I'm sorry,
Introduce yourself.
I'm getting ready to. Is it okay if I go? Okay. So my name is Raymond J. Rose. I was the lead investigator on the Colombo murder case and a former deputy chief of police for the Elk Grove Village Police Department. 21 years as the chief of police for the village of Mundelein and 4 years as the undersheriff for Lake County Sheriff's Department. Since June of 1984, I have appeared before this board to oppose the parole and release of Patricia Colombo. After 50 years in law enforcement, I finally retired. As people normally do when they retire, you look back over your career and how things are different today. Societal changes, changes in people, changes in crime, changes in attitudes. But the thing that is fixed in my mind is this case. The horrific things that Patricia Colombo and Frank DeLuca did to Frank, Mary, and Michael Colombo. They are as real to me now as if I was still in the house that day. I can still see and smell the crime scene. The horrific sight of the mutilated bodies, the blood everywhere. They are always with me, just as they are with the jurors, family and friends of the Columbos, the Elk Grove community, and the officers that were there. Some of you may have been younger when these murders occurred, so you wouldn't remember the impact that this triple homicide had on everyone that heard about it. These murders obtained daily national attention and news coverage. For this reason, I need to make this crime real to you, like you were there at the crime scene, like we all were, became the incidental victims of Patricia Colombo and Frank DeLuca. Time hasn't changed any of this for us. Time truly does not heal all wounds. Time doesn't minimize the significance of wiping out an entire family. Community members and family members are terrified that one day Patricia Colombo may walk free, and so are the witnesses and jurors in the trial, as well as the entire community. I still hear from these people about their concerns, especially when the parole hearing date nears. This is evidenced by letters you should have received from family members that I communicated with. Law enforcement has embraced the concept of the police response to victims. The concept of not re-victimizing individuals that had a crime committed against them or a loved one. Going through this parole process, even though unintentional, is re-victimizing everyone that was involved. This is my attempt to help you visualize the day in May of 1976 when I was dispatched to 55 Brantwood in Elk Grove Village, a quiet residential neighborhood with well-kept homes. This suburban family home was transformed into the scene of a grisly triple homicide. I was the investigator with the Elk Grove Village Police Department and was assigned as the lead investigator of the brutal extermination of Frank, Mary, and Michael Colombo at the hands of Patricia Colombo and Frank DeLuca. As you are aware, the parole board and I have met periodically over the years regarding the gruesome, senseless murders of her family, Frank, Mary, and Michael Colombo. 48 years ago, Patricia Colombo, along with Frank DeLuca, killed her family. It is impossible to imagine what would bring a person to commit such brutal crimes. It is also unimaginable that after killing your family, that spending time in jail would rehabilitate you. Stabbing your 13-year-old brother 87 times with a pair of scissors in the chest and back and shot once in the head. Murdering your mother, who was shot between the eyes, her throat slit from ear to ear and bludgeoned with a vase. Murdering your father, who was beaten so severely with a bowling trophy that the back of his skull was disintegrated and was stabbed numerous times in the throat and chest and shot in the head 4 times. There's no amount of time that can pass or good deeds you can do that will undo the evil that was done. It is important for me to again tell you about the real Patricia Colombo due to the comments and perceptions expressed today and at previous hearings that Patricia Colombo has been rehabilitated. It is extremely important for you to understand that Patricia Colombo methodically planned the murder of her family and also manipulated or attempted to manipulate many other people to assist in killing her family. You may look at her now and not understand what she is truly like. At that time, Patricia was an attractive young woman, skilled in using her looks and abilities to manipulate her family, her peers, and her teachers. Accustomed to using her looks to get what she wanted, she continued that practice when she committed these horrific crimes to manipulate the many men that she solicited to murder her family, including using sexual favors. Let me give you a few examples of how Patricia Colombo manipulated people and planned the murders. Patricia Colombo has been soliciting people to commit the murders for 8 months prior to the murders occurring without DeLuca's knowledge. She traded sex with 2 men that portrayed themselves as hitmen and gave them dossiers on her father, mother, and brother, including photographs, and even brought one of these men to the family home to see firsthand where she wanted the murders to be committed. She drew a detailed description of the interior of the home. She made a request to the hitmen that she wanted the murders committed during a holiday because that would be her present to the family. She also stipulated that she wanted to be there to witness it. After the murder and mutilation of her mother, she mailed her a Mother's Day card. She traded sex for the gun that was used to shoot all 3 victims. She discussed the murders and conducted dry runs with her friends after deciding that Frank DeLuca, were going to perform the murders themselves. She called her parents and arranged to meet with them the night they were murdered, bringing DeLuca to the residence. Patricia's hair was found in the blood on Michael's chest. Consider 13-year-old Michael that never had a chance to live his life. In the last moments of his life were being stabbed to death by his sister. Frank DeLuca testified before the judge and jury, substantiating that Patricia Colombo was in fact the instigator, planner, and manipulator that caused the death of her father, mother, and brother. Initially, she did not inform Frank DeLuca about her plans. But after some time, she told him about her plan to murder her family, manipulating him with lies to make it a life or death matter, spinning a tale about her godfather, Phil Capone, being a member of the mafia, and that her father was going to have her and DeLuca killed by the mob. DeLuca believed at that point that he either had to kill the family or he and Patricia Colombo were going to be killed. DeLuca testified to this at the trial. In the beginning of April 1976, Patricia became impatient when she realized the hitmen were not going to follow through with her plan. She had already convinced Frank DeLuca that the murders needed to be done for their survival, and she elicits the assistance of the assistant store manager for Bert Green of the Walgreens store where DeLuca worked as the manager. Bert Green assists them by making practice runs to see how long it took them to drive from Patricia and Frank's apartment in Lombard to the Colombo home so they can establish alibis. Patricia calls her father and mother the week before the murders under the guise of reconciling family differences in order to arrange a meeting on May 4th. That same week, they are telling store employees they are going to murder the Colombo family. The gun used to murder the family was obtained by Patricia from one of the hitmen over a month before the murders. There are some opinions that Frank DeLuca was the instigator of these crimes, but the reality is Patricia Colombo was the mastermind, the master manipulator, as evidenced by her trying to hire 2 hitmen and that being unsuccessful, leading Frank DeLuca down the path to murder the family. How does a person capable of conceiving and planning a heinous crime like that become rehabilitated? She has never admitted she committed the crimes. She has never shown any remorse for committing the crimes. She has even stated that she can't remember what happened. How does someone atone for crimes that they have committed if they haven't even taken the first steps of expressing remorse or admitting participation? I submit to you, Patricia Colombo is not rehabilitated. While incarcerated, Patricia Colombo ran a prostitution ring at the White Correctional Facility, pimping out her female inmates to prison staff. It was such a huge scandal, the prison warden, the chief corrections officer, and the corrections officers involved all lost their jobs. That again shows you the extent of her powers to manipulate, and even while in prison. This is rehabilitation. I still receive calls from family members and friends of Michael that are terrified she will be released from prison. One family member who has since passed away would never open his front door because he was afraid she may be standing there ready to kill him. She has yet to show any remorse or accept any responsibility for her crimes. She states that she can't remember any details about that night, and yet she spent 8 months organizing and planning the details. Do not parole Patricia Colombo. Send a message to Patricia Colombo and those like her that these acts of violence will never be tolerated by our society. Following the laws of the time, justice was administered in July of 1977 when the 12-member jury, after a 2-month-long trial before a judge in Cook County courtroom, rendered a verdict of guilty for 3 murders after deliberating for only 2 hours. The judge imposed a 200 to 300-year sentence for each of the murders, a 150-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder, a 50-year sentence for solicitation to commit murder. This was being considered a death penalty case until the United States Supreme Court put a moratorium on the death penalty as cruel and unusual punishment. It is obvious from the judge's 1,100-year sentence that he didn't want Patricia Colombo to ever be released back into society, the equivalent of today's sentence of natural life. We cannot and will not simply forgive, excuse, or forget these crimes, and the Illinois Prisoner Review Board should not as well. Given the ability of Patricia Colombo to perpetrate these savage crimes against her family, her own flesh and blood, her father, mother, and brother, no one can say it will not happen again. We can't become immune to this level of violence. The parole board needs to guide society by demonstrating that we cannot be tolerant of this type of vicious behavior. How can you be rehabilitated after killing your entire family and then mutilating their dead bodies? What is the value of these 3 innocent lives? There are a number of things you will be considering as you make your decision, and I would ask you to consider the following. Frank, Mary, and Michael Colombo were murdered viciously by Patricia Colombo, their daughter, their sister. The impact it had and still has on the entire community. Consider the family who are afraid that she's going to be released. The judge intended for her to spend the rest of her life in prison. Respect the decision of the judge and jury who for 2 months listened and evaluated all of the testimony and the evidence, sustained the intended life sentence. Speaking to you as the investigator who 48 years ago witnessed this brutal crime scene and investigated these savage murders, and on behalf of a society who was not willing to forgive and forget, we vehemently oppose and object to the parole and release of Patricia Colombo. As you are aware, the Prison Review Board has a duty to society. Protect it and keep it from becoming future victims of Patricia Colombo. If you wouldn't want her living next to your family, don't subject anybody else to that danger. By doing so, you are sending a message that there is value to the 3 lives that Patricia Colombo took. In conclusion, I would additionally request that the board assign another 3-year set. Please consider the victims of this crime when you make your decision and allow them 3 years of not having to relive this nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you. Would your police officer like to make a statement?
Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, afternoon. My name is Stephen Schmidt, and I retired from the Elk Grove Village Police Department in November of 2016 after serving 41 and a half years there, the last 17 as the chief of police. I continue to serve Elk Grove. I ran for trustee, and I am in my 2nd term as a village trustee. And I also want to say that I also was an instructor at William Rainey Harper Community College in Palatine class. My class starts in about 1 minute. I teach criminal justice there. On Tuesday, it's ironic because Tuesday I was talking in my class about parole and probation. I was explaining the importance of how these two how this plays part in our criminal justice system. I only wish I could have brought my class here with me today because they would have seen a lot. I saw a lot today and learned a lot. So I thank you for the service that you provide to the criminal justice system. I had a letter that I submitted, and I was going to be part of it, but you already got my letter. I just want to talk about something that happened to me Saturday that kind of ties into this. We had a death in our family, and we had a funeral on Saturday. And we were at the funeral home, and my eight-year-old grandson was there, and I could tell that he wasn't looking too good that day. He wasn't feeling too good. And he came up to me and said, "Grandpa, I just don't feel good." I says, "Well, let's walk out of the parlor. We'll go into the common area. There was a couch there." And we sat down, and he laid up against me. He wasn't feeling good. He put your arm around. I don't know if you're any of our grandparents. If you are, you know what I'm talking about. He felt that security with me. And I was sitting there thinking about, okay, this week I got a board meeting on Tuesday night. I worry about that. I have an event to go to tomorrow on Friday that I'm going to my class that I was teaching at Harper. Then I thought about today. I thought, here I am holding my grandson who's not feeling well. And as stated in the letter that I submitted to you, Frank and Mary Colombo never had that opportunity to be grandparents, to do what I did. Michael never had the opportunity to be a teenager, to go dating, get involved in sports in high school, get a driver's license, go to a prom, date, fall in love, get married, and have children of his own. He would have been in his early 60s now. Maybe he would have been a grandparent, and he could have been sitting on that couch comforting a grandchild. Never had that opportunity. That family never had that opportunity. In fact, that night on May 4th, 1976, that family ceased to exist because that family name would never be carried on. So I ask you to honor the intent of Judge Eugene Pincham, who is a very well-respected judge in the Illinois judicial system. As Ray Rose said, his intent was never to let Patricia or Frank out of prison, that they should serve life sentences. And because of that, I hope that you honor his decision, keep her in prison, and I agree with Ray to keep it at a 3-year set. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board?
I have one. I saw that the chief prosecutor in this case had joined you gentlemen for many years and objected to any parole for Ms. Colombo, but has now concluded that she has served enough time and demonstrated her rehabilitation and now supports the petition. I'm curious whether either of you have anything to say in response, other than what you've already said, but it seems a little unusual to see the chief prosecutor now supporting the petition.
I'm not aware that that is occurring.
Mr. Baliunas, Algis Baliunas?
Yeah, I know who he is, and I'm not aware that, quite frankly, that he's taken that position. I can tell you this. I just met with the state's attorney and the office of that deals with the parole hearings and parole. And I can tell you that the state's attorney's office is adamantly opposed to any parole.
Thank you.
Since you're both associated with the Elk Grove Police Department and were at the time of the crime, what services existed for families like Patricia Colombo's family, where there was a underage, a teenager involved with a married man at the age of 35? Did you have an investigative unit that looked into incidences of sexual abuse or predator or that type of stuff? I know a lot of departments have it now. What was the nature of your investigative services that would have protected someone like Patricia Colombo, who was being victimized by Mr. DeLuca at the age of 16?
The police department did not have any unit specifically to deal with that, but there were community social services available.
Thank you.
But can I finish? But I would submit that if there was an issue, it has to be reported for anybody to be aware of it occurring.
My understanding is that the police became aware of it when her father knocked out Frank DeLuca's teeth in a parking lot, and there were criminal charges that were pending, but somehow that was the notice, and that's when everyone sort of became aware of the fact that this was happening, or at least the police department would have known.
He did knock his teeth out, you're right. And that was because he was with his daughter.
You also mentioned something about.
Can I just add something to that?
Sure.
I'd like to add something to that. That Elk Grove Village Police Department was one of the first departments in Illinois to have social workers. We have social workers on staff when I started in 1975. So I would say that if that was brought to the attention of the police department, that part may not have been, our social workers definitely would have been involved, because we had a policy since I started that if we ever had a domestic situation, we had forms that we filled out that automatically went to our social workers to do follow-up. So that part of it may never have been brought to the attention of the police department.
One of the most surprising things to me in your presentation related to a comment you made about something that was happening at Dwight. I'm not aware that we have any information about this scandal involving Ms. Colombo running some kind of a prostitution ring. And I'm curious about, if it was so well known, why there wouldn't be a disciplinary record where she was ticketed for that conduct.
Well, it was on the front page of the Chicago Tribune for, I don't know how many days or weeks. And it's curious that you mention it, because all of those files disappeared somehow, because it had been brought up a couple years ago and nobody could find it because everything disappeared.
Well, you can understand that it would be challenging for us as a board to consider this information when there are no records that support it. So that's why I'm raising it, to find out if there's some information that you're aware of that we could be looking at that we don't have.
And I want to add to that, because you referenced that the correctional staff that was involved in this situation were dismissed. So there has to be some concrete documentation, at least as it relates to the involved parties. So I just wanted to touch that. Was my question to you, sir.
Well, and I agree with you. And this, as I say, came up a few years, maybe two parole hearings back. And everybody was trying to find all of this documentation and everything disappeared. But like I say, it was on the front page of the Chicago Tribune for, I don't know how many days.
Yeah, I'll just ask, were you able to review the master file, and was there anything?
I worked with the staff to confer about the master file, and based on my conferring with the staff about the master file, there was no evidence that she herself was personally involved in any kind of process. There was nothing there. Before we proceed, Mr. Stone, did you have anything in response to what you've heard?
I know that there were rumors. I know that some people believe those rumors. I live in a world of fact and proof, and I don't know that there are facts, and I've seen no proof. And I don't think you should evaluate an allegation that is salacious but unproved. I would ask you to ignore it. I don't know an explanation for this horrible tragedy other than that this child was sexually assaulted from age 7 to 13, and that she was groomed, trafficked, and abused by a man 18 years older than her. I don't know an explanation for it other than that. And I know some people may be reluctant to look at the woman who is 68 years old now and see how she is today. But in my world of criminal defense, which is now almost 50 years experience, I see often people going downhill, a downward trajectory brought on by some trauma, and then an upward rehabilitation caused by growth and hard work and thought. I see it all the time. I see it in the case of Patricia Colombo, and I see it as a great reason to grant parole.
Julie?
The statement in opposition had mentioned the 8 months of planning, much of it which had taken place without the knowledge of Mr. DeLuca. Clearly, there are cases in which women are manipulated or coerced to engage in criminal activity by manipulative and controlling loved ones. In this case, did you have any response specifically to the allegations that appear in evidence pertaining to the extent of planning that transpired without his knowledge or involvement?
I think the evidence is clear that Frank DeLuca was a manipulator, an abuser, a Lothario, an evil person. And that's my answer to that. It is incredible that he wouldn't have been at the helm of this. He's the guy that got his teeth knocked out. He's the guy that had the reason for revenge. He's the guy that had the reason for anger. And she was his puppet, his victim. That's my answer to your question.
Any further questions from board members? All right, seeing none.
Excuse me, I do, Mr. Tupie, I do. I just want to make sure that I understand that Mr. DeLuca was never investigated as a predator.
No.
Thank you.
All right, Robin?
The events that resulted in the tragic deaths of 3 people on May 7th, 1976 are unthinkable. That a teenage daughter would plan to kill her family and that she and her 35-year-old boyfriend, who is married and has 5 kids of his own, would murder each member of the Colombo family is horrific. And even as we focus on the murder of these 3 people, we must also recognize that Patty Colombo was also a victim to this crime as well. Nearly a half a century ago, Ms. Colombo was sentenced to more than 200 years for her crimes. Since that time, Illinois sentencing laws have been amended to reflect neuroscience. Specific factors that should be considered in sentencing are the age, the immaturity, the pressures from outside influences, victimization, including being the victim of sexual abuse. From the ages of 7 to 12, Ms. Colombo became the victim of sexual abuse by her godfather. These experiences hypersexualized her and made her susceptible to the advances of Frank DeLuca, a predator and sex abuser who groomed and controlled Ms. Colombo from the age of 16 years old. Even when DeLuca trafficked her with other men while he watched for his own sexual gratification, she was committed to him. As a teenager in this relationship, she was way in over her head and lacked the maturity to deal with her predicament. As a result, her circumstances grew more dire, and she believed she had no other choice but to stay with him. After he physically beat her and forced her to terminate her pregnancy, she was broken and lost. Dr. Fisher noted that Patricia Colombo has made substantial progress in making sense of her early sexual abuse and the secrecy it required and how that led to a chain of events linked to these murders. She also noted that sexual abuse in childhood and domestic violence with their attendant coercion, which she spoke to about today, deeply impact a person's cognitive beliefs about these issues that do not benefit them. She believes the self-esteem gained from her competency in helping others will assist her in whatever recovery she has left to do. After 48 years of being incarcerated, Patricia Colombo has proven that she is worthy of parole. She takes responsibility for the deaths of her father, mother, brother, and lives each day committed to helping others. Her personal growth has been remarkable in that she's achieved an A-grade security status, she's obtained multiple college-level degrees, and she dedicates her time to helping inmates with life's most challenging issues. She's passionate about her volunteer work, counseling and mental health unit, serving as an aide to the terminally ill patients at Logan, and counseling inmates on their own reentry plans. This morning, we received a letter from St. Leonard Ministries that she is welcome to be paroled there. Based on her remarkable rehabilitation and her solid parole plan, it is my recommendation that this board grant Patricia Colombo parole.
Do I hear a second? Ms. Goff seconds. Motion's been made and seconded to grant the parole of Patty Colombo. Those in, Ally.
Is there any space for discussion, or would anybody like to? I'm sorry, I was asking if there was space for discussion after a motion. Yeah. No.
I think we've already had our discussion, and there's been a motion that's on the table now, so, and it's been seconded. I think now we just call the roll.
Okay.
Ms. Schaffner,
Yes.
Mr. Bolin,
No.
Mr. Coates,
No.
Ms. Globoker,
No.
Ms. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
No.
Ms. Taronis,
No.
Mr. Heaton,
No.
Ms. Tyson,
No.
Mr. Tupy.
No. By a vote of 8-2, the motion fails.
I move for a 2-year set.
Second.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded for a 3 or 2? 2-year set. Go ahead and call the roll.
Ms. Schaffner,
Yes.
Mr. Bolin,
Yes.
Mr. Coates,
Yes.
Ms. Globoker,
Yes.
Ms. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Heaton,
Yes.
Ms. Taronis,
Yes.
Ms. Tyson,
Yes.
Mr. Tupy.
By a vote of 10-0, the motion for a 2-year set passes. You didn't get 3, but you got 2 years. And Mr. Stone, you did an excellent job. We always appreciate your presentations.
Thank you. I appreciate the hard work that this board does, and we'll see you in 2 years.
Okay.
We'll learn from our experiences today and try and get this done. Patricia is a worthy candidate, folks, and I know in your hearts you feel that.
And he just had to get in the last word, didn't he? I know in your hearts you feel that. Okay. Anyways, let's go into reading your comments. We're not going to have to wait 2 years because 2 years, it went by. It goes by fast, doesn't it? When you're having fun, when you're not locked up in prison. So we will go and watch the parole hearing that happened in 2026. There's a timestamp in the description if you don't want to go through me reading your comments. Some of you say, I don't want to read the comments. I actually get emails from people saying, Mandoo, don't read the comments. And it's like, I leave timestamps. Are you really going to go out of your way to email me about going through the comment? Whatever. Okay, I digress. Anyways, in the next parole hearing, we will see her. She makes an appearance, and Illinois has upped their games in some way in the sense that we now are starting to see the inmates through the camera. In some cases, we hadn't in the previous years, but at the same time, they also made some bad downgrades, whereas they are using a microphone that is like worse than a potato. I tried to do the best I could with the sound quality on that. It is what it is. But let's go through the comments. I don't know if you hear Coco barking in the background. I try to change my mic settings so that you don't, but if you do, I'm sorry. If she can't ask for forgiveness, means she believes that she has done nothing wrong. That's a good point. Also, yeah, here's this Susan Smith parole hearing. I covered Susan Smith's parole hearing. Fewer than like 7% of you seen it, if you're curious. Based on her sentence, she should not be released. Parole meeting every 2 years is ridiculous. How many parole hearings has she had already? Like 20 or something, 30? Her supporters look exactly like I thought they would. They always do. I love the detective. The original crime fighter, he is still coming to the parole even after time. I do too. He's like out of the Hollywood movie. She is not a vet with PTSD. Shame on you, counselors, for trying to claim that BS. KC Cat, it is so good to see you. I saw you in, it seems like you may have taken a hiatus. I hadn't seen you in a while, and now I've seen you in the chats again. And thank you for the memberships and supers recently. Really appreciate it. And good to see you, Cat. Don't be a stranger. The detective was amazing, so organized and eloquent, perfect Parole testimony. And we're going to see him again, by the way. He is back. Not all heroes wear capes. Some retired detectives' badges. Some wear retired detectives' badges. Did they seriously just compare her to a combat vet? What is wrong with people? And let's see if they changed their strategy at all. It's just crazy that the Innocence Project and all these people come here on her behalf, and also trying to make it out like LaDuca was the one in charge, that he was the puppet master, when very clearly she planned the murder for 6 months. He had no idea that she was planning it. She tried to get 2 other men to do it, and they didn't. And that's when she went and did this. She manipulated him, and that is my belief. That made me so mad. My blood pressure went up. My family has a lot of vets, mainly my big brother, a Vietnam combat vet. You know what? I can't with Coco. Hold on. Let me go get him. Okay, and here's Coco. I don't know if you guys heard him barking. He was having a fight with the vacuum, and I know there are ways to train. Oh, I don't see my background's on. I didn't even realize that. I know that there are ways to train dogs to like the vacuum, but we never did vacuum training, so he always goes nuts. So I'll just take him. And broken moral compass, offensive to say the least. Oh my God, I'm out of breath for going up and down the stairs. That is like, I'm out of shape. Okay. They make good evil and evil good. They make confusion their asset. Really, combat vets. Okay. The old police officer is amazing. What a strong personality to attend every parole hearing. Is there any other officer who has done the same thing? I also think myself she was not being abused at all. If she was, she would have saved her brother, not murdered him. They were probably eating pills and thought of a plan to get the house, taking her brother's life because her brother would have some stuff to let him. Taking out the mother and brother gives me no doubt on the abuse. Why didn't they just take out the dad? And doing what she's done, 89 or whatever, would take in ages. That wasn't a few minute event. I can only imagine what the scene was like afterwards, making me envy the officers and investigators who deal with the aftermath. The person who done, okay, I mean, I get what she's saying here. I was thinking about this too. Why stab? But why stab her brother so many times? And some things make me think that maybe she was jealous of him. Like I believe that she is a sociopath, and it might, like, I just think it was a rage. And she has a juvenile criminal record that, of course, we don't have access to, but they discuss in executive session. I think she's always been just like antisocial and whatnot. Thank you for allowing us to see this. I suffered a double homicide in my immediate family, October 25th, 1987. My husband and father-in-law, Herbert, on his 70th birthday, and Mark Lee on 30th, were unprovokably shot to death on Washington Crossing the state park besides the Delaware River in New Jersey. The total stranger assailant was convicted by a jury and was sentenced to 2 30-year terms, during which he died in prison. It's just horrible. Well, why does she have to speak? Makes no sense. Well, she will be speaking. We're going to see her. Wow, they all spoke so well, but where's she? She'll be here. We're gonna see her. And she looks and acts everything that you would expect, which is like really crazy, by the way, how the support, they come up with these crazy, like, delusional takes with no evidence. And it's like they paint a story for someone who doesn't exist. And we're gonna see that when they compare her to Vietnam vet. I wanted to scream on my phone. I know, it really is sick. They The lawyer and so-called psychologists only want to look at today. The victims aren't worth the word. Just wait till you hear from the expert that they bring for this next hearing. You're comparing the sociopath to people like my father, brother, and cousins that are combat veterans. That's beyond offensive. It's absurd. People she murdered aren't getting a second chance. She shouldn't either. As a vet, oh, Holly. Guys, it's Lady Holly in the chat. As a veteran for Australia with Afghan time served, I was severely insulted and disgusted to use studies used to help us with PTSD and processing the horrific things that happen in the Middle East. The so-called trauma of killing your own family is disgusting. And for those of you who don't know, Lady Holly from Australia who had been a huge part of this channel, a massive help to this channel with research, especially when Sir Richard became so severely ill that he couldn't do it anymore. And Lady Holly was an officer, served in Afghanistan for a country in Australia, and she took indirect fire in her base. It was like a mortar round or even an artillery shell, and the shrapnel severely messed up her arm. She, although being a crazy Aussie as she was, went back to the service, and there was a small splinter from the shrapnel that became infected, and she ignored it because she's so tough, and she went through like a whole year just ignoring it, not like the classic crazy Aussie thing. And eventually the infection became so bad it actually disabled her arm. So she had no use of her right arm, had to go into surgeries all the time, dealing with PTSD from taking that indirect fire and being in that wounded. And she would do all her research and all the data entry from her phone with one hand. And it was just crazy. We have Sir Richard, who's like legally blind and in a wheelchair and dealing with severe illness that happened from his service. And Lady Holly, who was dealing, and we had the dream team. And then Lady Holly was hit by a car walking her dog. And she wrote us from this is her 1 year anniversary of death. It's actually coming up soon. We should do something for her. And it took infection. We haven't heard from her again. She sent us from the hospital. There's infection. Don't worry, it's okay. And we never heard from her again. But Lady Holly, we miss you. We all miss you. We should do something for her in her memory. At least there are some sensible people in the world. It took 25 years to come up with I was sexually assaulted. No, we live in a society where victimhood is the actual stance, that unsolved horrible behavior, and I am just over it. It is so convenient for Tricia Colombo not to remember details of her crime against her family. Memory is a tricky thing. One person said, good excuse. We're going to see if she sticks with the same story again. I remember this case, giving my age away here, but this woman remembered it. She's just trying to get out. How can she forget her poor little brother? They did awful things to her whole family. I remember this too at the time. I live in one of the neighborhood towns. Wow. You sure they didn't commission that sad little cardboard box maze from a third grade classroom? Thank you. My thoughts exactly. Looked like a layout of house. No, really, how ridiculous. They're so drunk. They're so wasted on their Kool-Aid, where they actually think, let us show you this cardboard box that she made, which talks about victims and abuse and the other walls. It's like, we're not all wasted on your Kool-Aid. Stop it, guys. It's stupid. It makes you look so stupid. So glad you mentioned the 10 whole hours the experts spend with Trish. 2 whole work days. I know exactly. I spent 10 hours with her, and I can tell you for certain, joke. I heard 2 hours. Oh, wow. You know her so well, right? I know. Imagine what it is. You sit there in a room and you have a couple discussions. Okay. She was a pimp in prison. Amazing success story. So we did look for the evidence of this. After the hearing as a search, we got to find it because they said they can't find it. and we couldn't find anything either. But I do believe that it did happen. And just, it's hard to find archives like that pre-internet. Crooked County, Illinois document disappeared. Not shocked. I still don't understand why they say it wasn't her fault, because the dude groomed her into it and then turned around to say, but she takes full responsibility. Like, dude, you can't say it's not my fault, but also take responsibility. The girl, now woman, never took accountability for the crime. She just said that she has no memory. As for the scandal in prison, if that detective was smart, he would dig into the Sun and Times Tribune, microblah. It was all over the papers and multiple people lost their jobs. The fact that official records have disappeared should be alarming to the parole board, because it absolutely happened. She was pimping out inmates. So Casey Cat dropping the wisdom. They do bring it up in the second hearing. He brings up like minutes of the prior parole hearings, and they do talk about people getting fired. But things disappeared. So, the conspiracy probably is that information disappeared by whomever was involved in it. I just realized that my screen is not full. Isn't it highly irregular that Miss Colombo isn't present in her hearing and she passed a message to the board? It's not at that time. Just because Illinois is not exactly up to par with things, but we will see her at this hearing. My thanks to the detective who spoke for the victims. OG detective is a blessing, amazing man, but I think she will get out in a few years. Well, let's find out. Why didn't she speak? Multiple degrees, paid by taxes. What did her brother Slaughter have to do with her good father abusing her? Exactly. Mother, father, maybe, but exactly. And that's where you lose any credibility. I think she's just straight up a psychopath, right? Like, why is that so hard for her advocates to believe? It's interesting to me that those are supposed to spend life in prison are getting education and degrees and tax dollars, and that those who are struggling financially degrees are not in prison. Oh, well, right. Makes sense, because it doesn't. It's just unreal. And the brutality of this case is just downright devastating and heartbreaking. It is pretty crazy. I joined the military during the time of the government discontinued the GI Bill. When it was reinstated, many of us still didn't qualify after serving 20 years, so I had to apply for financial aid and student loans just to continue my education, because I didn't have the luxury of the GI Bill. And yet a serial killer can receive free education and training. Make it make sense, ladies and gentlemen. There is so much wrong when you go down into nitty-gritty of how things work. We had a spec in 66, Colombo in 76, then Gacy in 78. Pretty freaky times in Illinois back then. Yeah, that's a good point. Wow. All right, guys. I mean, there are a lot of comments. I want to get to them all, but I think we've covered them. So, guys, we're going to go and watch hearing number 2. Again, they're using like a potato for a microphone. So at some points it's very difficult to hear them. At some points it's not as difficult. I tried fixing it. I didn't doing my best, but we are going to hear from Patricia herself. Let's pay attention to see if they change or how they change their strategy. And let's jump in.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We have returned to open session, and I will turn it back over to Mr. Bowler.
All right, thank you. All right, I'd like to proceed in discussing the institutional adjustment of Ms. Colombo. Ms. Colombo appeared in good physical health. And the board has access to the psychological evaluation that we did discuss in executive session. Ms. Colombo has taken part in significant amounts of programming and services over her incarceration. Most significantly is her involvement in Christian counseling, which started in the 90s and eventually grew to include involvement and even volunteer leadership in developing chaplaincy services. This is supported by testimony from Becky Funk, who started a prison ministry in 2006 and has been working with Ms. Colombo since 2008. She initially started by providing counseling, but over time worked together in chaplaincy, helped to start a chapel service at Logan, and coordinated ministry operations within the prison. Ms. Funk's church is ready to offer support, including a year of housing and potential assistance with a vehicle. She testified that she has witnessed Ms. Colombo live out a life consistent with her faith, and she believes Ms. Colombo to be born again and wholly changed. Ms. Colombo has maintained a remarkable disciplinary record, particularly since 2000. Prior to that time, after reviewing the master file, there are a handful of pages where the tickets mostly amount to minor contraband issues, some unauthorized movement, and an incident pretty early on involving some beer trafficked in. The only tickets of concern involved a 97 dangerous contraband ticket, where a plastic knife with razor blades attached was discovered in the cell, and a 99 intimidation threats ticket. Since 2000, she has accrued a major contraband ticket in 2004 and a minor unauthorized movement ticket in 2006, with no tickets to follow in the last 20 years. Given historical arguments about a prostitution ring, I also scoured the master file, and it should be noted that zero mention of anything related to such ring could be found in the master file. Regardless of theories about information being removed from the records, I think it's worth noting that Ms. Colombo has nothing in the record that should be held against her at this time. Ms. Colombo has pursued education during her time as well. She completed her GED in county jail in '76, a secretarial sciences degree in the '80s, and then an applied science degree, an associate's degree, and a bachelor's degree by the early '90s. She has held several job assignments, particularly since 2010, including 3 years as a special needs worker, 10 years as a housing specialist, 2 years as a chaplaincy specialist, 2 years as a janitor, 4 months as a paint shop laborer, and was a clinical services clerk in 2025. Ms. Colombo was classified on August 7th, 2025 as grade A medium security with zero escape risk. Jack Donson of the Federal Prison Education and Reform Alliance performed a pattern risk assessment on Ms. Colombo to determine risk of recidivism for violence and general recidivism. You all have that assessment in the file as well. I'll say just a couple of notes from the hearing, the interview. Based on the methodology, most of the factors now weigh positively in her favor, given the amount of time that has passed and how she has adjusted in prison. Mr. Johnson admits that nothing can change the heinous nature of the offense itself. That said, she scored incredibly low with a -15 for general recidivism and -2 for violent recidivism. He stresses it is a single tool to help make an assessment for community risk, but that he also believes strongly in looking beyond at the evidence of adjustment and behavior, which in her case only supports the low risk assessment in his view. He also believes the depth of the faith factor at play only serves to maintain that change. He felt the risk of recidivism is very unlikely. Parole plans. Ms. Colombo has a strong parole plan, including already being approved for placement at St. Leonard's Grace House program. David Harris, as well as Anna Cruz of St. Leonard's, both testified to their continued acceptance of Ms. Colombo into the program, including residential services. Ms. Cruz testified that her intake interview was very strong, that Ms. Colombo was very receptive to any services and would be a good fit. It was shared that the Women's Justice Institute may have some employment opportunity available. Ms. Colombo is ready to work or volunteer with all the agencies and individuals she has been working with so far. She does recognize the barriers given her life stage and time in prison. Dion Griggs of the Illinois Prison Project also testified to working with her as a domestic violence advocate and helping her make the connection to St. Leonard's. He would continue to work with her for the first 90 days in a heavy capacity with reentry and can offer some extended services with handoffs and connections to other systems as well. Ms. Colombo historically has carried support from former inmates as well as community members and a host of institutions. It appears that many of those same support continue to sign on their support today. In a closing statement to the board in my interview, Ms. Colombo stated that it is always hard to come before the board and ask for a second chance when she didn't give one herself. She stressed that she is well aware of the opposition and she often feels like she is 50-50 on her own case, half the time agreeing with the family and Mr. Rose. She often feels like staying where she is at, as it is all she can offer to those she harmed. She's incredibly self-aware of the weight of the case and the harm she caused. And deep down, she feels all she can do is leave it up to God and the board to make the decision they feel is most appropriate. Cook County State's Attorney did submit a letter of opposition. They provided their own statement of facts and attached the appellate court transcript from '83. They seem to take issue with her historical failure to take accountability for the crimes, while they acknowledge efforts toward rehabilitation and her good institutional record. They believe it doesn't negate the brutal circumstances of the murders or the sentence imposed by trial court. They're obviously here today, and I will let them speak at the appropriate time. It does appear that they requested a 3-year set as well. There has historically been a strong record of significant opposition in this case, and there are another 16 current letters of opposition from community members on the case. Obviously, any victim-oriented opposition is discussed in executive session. Ms. Colombo's first year of consideration for parole was 1984. She has been heard 23 times prior to this hearing. She received 3-year sets in 84, 88, 95, 98, 01, 08, 11, 14, 17, and 20, and a 2-year set in 24. Ms. Colombo received 1 vote in favor of granting in 2020 and received 2 votes in favor of granting in 2024. With that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Coates.
Okay. Thank you for that presentation. Does any board members have any questions for Mr. Boland? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and swear in our witnesses this time.
Ms. Colombo, I will also have you stand and raise your right hand as well.
Should just stand or I really can't. Ms.
That's
Colombo's
fine.
having trouble.
That's fine.
That's fine, thank you.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here. We'll begin with behalf. Please state your name and your relationship to Ms. Colombo.
Rachel White, domain of the Illinois Prison Project, and it's my honor to represent Ms. Colombo. Just by way of introductions, I'm here today with Jack Donson, whose report we mentioned earlier.
Jack Donson, the Federal Prison Education and Reform Alliance.
And I think if it's okay with you, Mr. Coates, I think I'll just make a couple remarks. I have a few questions for Jack, just by way of presenting a little more detail, and maybe a few questions for Ms. Colombo, if that's okay with Mr. Boland, Mr. Coates.
Sure, thank you.
So first, I just want to say I really appreciated Mr. Boland's presentation. I can tell you also that Ms. Colombo made several comments to me after that hearing, really appreciating how different that hearing felt from some of her older hearings. Recent hearings may be accepted, but over the years that she's done that hearing many, many times, and that she hasn't always felt as well received as she did in that hearing, and felt very respected. I will say also, yeah, I think it was a really good meeting, so we appreciate your remarks. I'll say also that I was really moved. I also was using the word swinging to refer to the dynamic with regard to Mr. DeLuca. That was the word that he used in his conversations with Ms. Colombo, that he was professing a swinging lifestyle. And Ms. Colombo had used that word, and I was using that word. And in that meeting, Mr. Boland, I'm not sure that you maybe explained your whole thought process, but you made a comment to that effect, that I'm not sure this was swinging, and you asked some questions to sort of get to the dynamic between them. And then, today, obviously, your opinion that something to the effect that I wouldn't refer to that as swinging. And it fit with a lot of other aspects of this case for me in terms of the abusive dynamics between Mr. DeLuca was responsible for. So I just appreciate you giving a name to that. I think Ms. Colombo also reflected on that alignment as well. So thank you for that. I just wanted to say, I think, overall, most importantly, it's been really powerful to allow Ms. Colombo to speak for herself. We had a long hearing, and she talked about how she took responsibility for many aspects of this case. There are issues with her memory about what happened on the day of the offense, and that hasn't changed. With regard to the planning beforehand, which in many ways is the worst aspect of this case, or makes what ultimately happened worse, because she was involved in the planning for so many years. She was very clear, I think, on her call with us that is something that she takes responsibility for. I do think that there's been details that have varied over the years. I think she has taken responsibility for this case for the past at least for the past, I should say at least the past 30 years. I know early in the case, when she was first arrested, there's some differences. I think overall it's been consistent. Of course, there's contested details, but I think overall she's been consistent in taking responsibility. I think she hasn't always been able to, fully express that. So I was glad that we were able to do that together. I want to talk about who's present in the room today. So I'm lucky to say that we have a number of community groups that have come out in support, and I just want to make sure everybody's aware of everybody who is here today. Of course, you have a letter signed by a number of anti-violence organizations. Many of them have also come in person. We have, and if I could just ask people to either stand or raise their hand, I have at least 8 individuals who are here representing a number of anti-violence groups. And then I have, and you could take your hands down or sit down. I have at least 7 people who are here representing church ministry groups, and then North Park University I've also included in that group. And you can sit or take your hand down. And then I have at least, and I just keep saying at least because there was a lot of people, so I think there's some that didn't get signed in, but I have at least 14 people representing reentry or community support groups, many of which have, of all these groups, I should say, have committed to providing reentry support. If you could stand or raise your hand if you're not already. I also have 2 individuals from the Republicans of Elk Grove Township who actually, and you can stand, they actually heard about this case because they attended the Elk Grove Village Board meeting following the last denial of parole, and were very moved to come out in support of this case. So this includes Township Committee Person Edward Lipinski and Deputy Committee Woman Amy Osterman. They heard the report back of the denial and were disturbed about the details, recognizing this as an abuse situation and a situation in which someone has been in prison for a very, very, very long time. And Committee Person Lipinski told me today that he would offer a room in his house if Ms. Colombo needed it. And you can have a seat. Thank you so much. I also have IDOC, former IDOC head of IDOC Women and Family Services, which is Sharon Fitzer, I believe, who can't stand but will raise her hand. She served in this position for over 20 years, during which time she knew Ms. Colombo personally and very well. There's also a number of individuals, not necessarily representing an organization, who are here in support of Ms. Colombo. This includes, and you guys can stand or raise your hand. And this includes, if you could just wave, Tracy Kelly, who wrote the letter, thank you, who wrote the letter that appears on PDF page 14 of your supplement. This is the letter from the person who describes being 5 years old and growing up in Mount Prospect when this case was happening. Her mother was just a few years older than Ms. Colombo, and so there was a lot of shared, community overlap, community friends and stuff like that. And she talks about remembering this happening, meaning the murders, and talks about how the town talk about Trisha's crime have faded. She's talked to thousands of people over the years in this area. And in her opinion that she states in her letter, release would essentially be in line with 99% of people that I've met in the northwestern suburbs over the years. There's also a number of people who were incarcerated with Trish. If you guys could stand or raise your hands. We took a back of the napkin count, and these individuals have collectively, you're making me laugh, Trish. These individuals have collectively known Ms. Colombo for over 324 years. And you all have a lot of letters of support and testimonials to the effect that Ms. Colombo has had on their lives. Thank you. You can sit. And lastly, just in terms of the support that I want to recognize, I neglected to get this letter in time to include in your materials. I do have extra copies, which obviously you don't have to receive. But if I could just read briefly from one letter, just an excerpt. This is a letter from WINGS, which is the domestic violence program that covers Elk Village. So I think it's based in Palatine, but it is responsible for providing the domestic violence services for Elk Grove Village. And that community, the domestic violence community, the domestic violence program rather, WINGS, this letter is signed by Rebecca Darr, D-A-R-R, who's the president and CEO of the WINGS program. And I'll just read one excerpt of this. They write, as the domestic violence program serving Elk Grove Village, we write to encourage you to grant parole to Ms. Patricia Colombo. And they talk about what they're aware of about the case, including the horrific murders that she's responsible for and committed. And then they talk about the relationship with Mr. DeLuca. And they state, based on these facts, we would label this relationship as involving sexual abuse by Mr. DeLuca, which is in line with what Mr. Boland, I think, concluded earlier. We are also aware that when Ms. Colombo was 19 years old, she discovered that she was pregnant and Mr. DeLuca struck her, knocked her down, and accidentally shot her by either throwing, dropping, or discharging a gun. He later forced her to have an abortion against her wishes. Our field refers to this pattern as reproductive abuse. We understand that for much of the relationship, Ms. Colombo was not physically or otherwise forced to do what Mr. DeLuca wanted. However, although we have not personally evaluated Ms. Colombo, we can say from our experience that many survivors develop ways of surviving abuse, especially child sexual abuse, that appear to be present in this case. Although Mr. DeLuca never forced Mr. Colombo to engage in sexual activities, given her young age and extremely recent history of child sexual abuse, it would not be uncommon for a child sexual abuse survivor to do things to appease and to go along with the sexual demands of an older man. That is not the same thing as consenting. It appears to us that Mr. DeLuca took advantage of his age, power, and experience, and that he groomed and sexually exploited Ms. Colombo. And they go on to discuss the lack of services in the 60s and 70s, also noting somewhere that their program was established in 1985, which would have been 9 years after Ms. Colombo was incarcerated. They also state that in the event that Ms. Colombo is granted parole, WINGS would be willing to provide counseling to her as a survivor of abuse, should she wish to receive services. And I'll, if it's okay, I think I'll just actually turn, if you're ready, Trish, Ms. Colombo, I'm going to just turn to you briefly with just a couple of questions, maybe just one or two. I know it's
okay.
How is it affecting you to see or to hear? I know you can't see them. So many people in the room here to support you.
It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Appreciated. I'm thankful. Little hard to process. I didn't expect so much.
Ms. Colombo, was it accurate what Mr. Boland described about your feelings of deserving to be granted parole? Can you speak to your feeling of whether you think that you deserve this?
A lot has been made of the work I've done with a lot of the other women who I've been incarcerated with over the years, and it's very easy to see their worth and to understand they are not the sum total of the things that they've come to prison for, and so it's difficult for me. It's difficult for me to look past the crimes that I'm involved in committing, and easier to look past what other people have done. And quite frankly, recently, several of those women have kind of called me on it, talking about I'm bordering on hypocrisy, that I can see so much greatness in them and not in myself. And so, deserving, I don't know about deserving, but I know this. I know that given the opportunity, that I would use it well, and that I would be able to say to any community that I was a part of.
Thank you. I might have more questions for you, Trish, but I think I'll turn to Jack Donson for a moment and give you a little bit of a break. So, Mr. Donson, I know that your report was included in the materials that were provided, and that's actually in the supplement. It's the first thing that's attached to the supplement that I provided. But if you would just, I'm going to ask you a couple questions to speak briefly about your report. Can you just very briefly introduce yourself and your background?
Sure. I worked for the federal government in the Federal Bureau of Prisons as a correctional treatment specialist for 23 years. I retired in 2011, and I basically train, educate, consult around the country and support the federal defender community. I've been working directly with federal prisoners for going on 40 years now. 2 years ago, I started a nonprofit with like-minded retired Bureau of Prisons people, a medical doctor, a psychologist, and we support people in federal prison and their families. And then we still continue to train and educate the federal justice community on prison issues.
And the members might have more questions, but I'm just going to ask you a few things briefly just to make sure we get it on the table. You completed a risk assessment of Ms. Colombo. Can you tell us a little bit about what is this risk assessment that you did and what were the results of it?
Well, everything today is a tool, an algorithm. I mean, I'm old school, but the empirical data that go into developing these tools, it is what it is. It predicts. The First Step Act of 2018 created this, what's referred to as the pattern risk assessment, recidivism risk assessment. It's the prisoner assessment tool targeting the estimated risk and needs. Common tool used by the Bureau of Prisons today since the First Step Act. And Patricia obviously scores it's probably the lowest scores I've seen in my career, but the tool now is only about 6 years old, but definitely the lowest scores that I've seen. It's a 4-level risk system, minimum, low, medium, and high. She is minimum for general recidivism risk as well as violent recidivism risk. And many of the facets of this tool are pretty similar to the tool that's done by the Department of Corrections as well. So there's similar weighted averages as far as some of the data.
And I think this might have resulted in my error, but you did sort of a preliminary assessment, or I think you might have called it a provisional assessment of Ms. Colombo, which found that she had a -15 score on general and -2 on violent. I got those reversed.
Ms. White Domain?
Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify that we have read that assessment. And so if you can you frame your comments to addressing any errors, omissions, or any additions you'd like to add?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. The hard copy assessment is a -26 and a -8, which differs from, I guess, the other hearing. It's either, it could only be either a math error or I did this on March 20th, and it comes from the federal prison's website. They do periodically tweak the data points in the algorithms, but I do believe it would have been more of a mathematical error than anything. And these scores are even better, lower than the initial assessment, actually, with -26 and -8.
Sure. Thank you.
I'll pause there. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for counsel or witnesses? Any board members? Okay, seeing none at this time, we will go to opposition. Ms. Kwong?
Can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. My name is Courtney Quam. I am a Cook County Assistant State's Attorney. I do have 3 victim protesters here with me, so I'm going to allow them to speak first, and then I will go last. And first up is Mr. Ray Rose.
Good morning. My name is Raymond J. Rose. I was the lead investigator on the Colombo murder case. I spent 50 years in law enforcement and am now retired. Since June of 1984, I have appeared before this board to oppose the parole and release of Patricia Colombo. My reason for writing and being here is again to protest the release and parole of Patricia Colombo and to remind you of the brutality of the murders, the extensive planning she did in advance of the murders, and to follow up on some questions from the last hearing. So let me begin by giving you a brief description once again of the murders and the mutilation of the bodies that occurred. The fact is,
Sir, I don't believe your microphone is on. Can you hold down that button right there so we make sure it's on? Thank you. Can you test it out for me?
sorry. The fact is, Patricia Colombo, along with Frank DeLuca, killed her entire family. And mutilated the body.
My apologies, sir. Your microphone keeps going out. Are we able to switch him out of microphone? Should be on. Thank you for that. Please proceed.
All right. Again, sorry. All right, so the fact is that Patricia Colombo, along with Frank DeLuca, killed her entire family and mutilated their bodies. Michael, her 13-year-old brother, was asleep in his bed. They stood him up and shot him once in the head. She then stabbed him 87 times with a pair of scissors in the chest, neck, and back. Dropped a heavy bowling trophy on his head, crushing part of his skull. They murdered her mother, who was shot between the eyes, her throat slit from ear to ear, and bludgeoned with a vase. They shot her father in the head 4 times, which initially did not kill him. So they beat him severely with a heavy lamp, a bowling trophy, disintegrating the back of his skull. Also, he was stabbed numerous times in the throat and chest. These murders obtained national attention and news coverage then, and they still do today. So it is worth spending some time to show you that Patricia Colombo spent 8 months planning the murder of her family. So Patricia Colombo threatened to kill her father in front of the police station, which I witnessed. After she was charged with stealing employee checks and credit cards from a local grocery store across from the Walgreens where she worked. Her father bonded her out, and that is when she threatened to kill him. October of 1975, Patricia met Lanny Mitchell, who she eventually saw socially, along with Roman Savzinski, who was well known in Cook County government. Patricia mentioned the animosity between her family and her, and that she wanted to find someone to kill them. Mitchell bragged then that he knew people that could take care of her problem. Patricia began calling Mitchell multiple times in October of 1975, wanting to know when he was going to kill the parents. Patricia then gave him a listing of the family's activities, including schedules, photos, pictures, and floor plans of the Colombo house. November of 1975, Patricia continually demanded to know when the murders would occur and what was taking so long. Mitchell stated Patricia wanted the murders committed around a holiday as her present to them. Savzinski was informed of the murder for hire contract and demanded money be provided up front. Patricia told him that the money for payment would come after the killings from an insurance policy. In the interim, she offered sex in exchange, and both men accepted. To spare you the sordid details, these meetings occurred numerous times over the months. December of 1975, Patricia took Mitchell to the house to give him a tour and show him the layout, and surprisingly was confronted by her mother and her aunt, which was her mother's sister.
Sir, thank you for your testimony. I don't mean to be insensitive, but we are well aware, every board member on this panel is well aware of the facts of the case. Is there anything else you would like to describe in regards to opposition?
I think it's important that these timelines are emphasized, because in these conversations, people are saying that Patricia was under the influence of Frank DeLuca. And I'm getting to the point where that is absolutely not true.
Okay.
Patricia Colombo planned for 8 months to have this family killed. And when they realized that they weren't going to have these people do the murders, her and DeLuca decided to do it themselves. But we get to a point in time where Patricia Colombo realizes that they're not going to do the murders. This is at the point in time, we're in April of 1976, where she now has to get Frank DeLuca involved. Up to this point in time, Frank DeLuca had no knowledge of the planning and what was going on. It's very, very significant and very, very important and needs to be recognized. When she concocts this story to tell DeLuca, her father is a member of the mafia and he's going to have them killed. And going back in time, you heard where there was a physical confrontation and DeLuca was butt stroked in the mouth by Frank Colombo. That is what started this. And that's where she tells DeLuca, who, by the way, at his trial testifies that what I'm telling you occurred, that he had no knowledge of any of this planning. She told him the father was going to kill them, so they had to kill him first. They, under the guise of wanting to reconcile, Patricia contacts the parents under the guise of reconciling and apologizing for what's taking place. knowing that the murders are going to occur on this particular night of May 4th, she goes to the house with DeLuca and the murders occur. So another thing that's significant about this is Frank DeLuca's cellmate was bonded out by Marilyn DeLuca to because he agreed to kill Bert Green, who was one of the witnesses that was going to testify against Colombo and DeLuca. What's significant about that? That's after they're arrested and they're in jail, that they're still looking to kill people. That's significant when you start thinking about what their thought processes are and where they're trying to go with this. And here's the point I'm trying to make with this timeline, and this is the point that's very significant about it. At the last couple of hearings, it's discussed she doesn't remember the day of the murders, and the psychology of this is possible. But does she remember the days, the weeks, the months beforehand while she's planning the execution of the family? Of course she does. 8 months planning of this. And there, to go now outside of the information that you're referring to, sir, I think it's important that I have an ability to clarify some points from the last hearing.
Please do so briefly.
So in the last hearing, statements were made by parole board members about Patricia being the victim without any proof. She was victimized, except Patricia Colombo's trail of lies, which kept changing over the years. And I asked, why are these lies being believed? The facts become fiction over the years. Information in her file isn't reviewed thoroughly, which aids in the deception. And this is referring to the prostitution ring discussion. So whether or not this was true was questioned at the last hearing. It was all over the newspapers and also in the PRB minutes. And this is where Member Heaton had asked a question about the existence of the prostitution ring that Patricia Colombo was involved in. So attached to my letters that were sent in are Chicago Tribune and Paddock publication articles showing the grand jury indictment of 3 guards and that 8 staff members were fired or resigned due to the investigation, including the warden. And then I list out minutes from the en banc hearings from November of 24, where a discussion occurs. Ms. Golbakar questioned Ms. Schaffner if she reviewed the master file. She says she reviews the file and there's no evidence in the mastering that she was involved. So I have an excerpt and you can read it from September 15th, 1979, Paddock Publications. Colombo has clout, says jailed inmates show her ability to manipulate and rule in any situation. So what is not in the file, this is from en banc May of 2014. What is not in the file, I'm quoting, but I think needs to be at least mentioned, is in 1979, it was alleged that Ms. Colombo was part of a scandal in which she helped organize improper contact between female inmates and correctional officers. So in 2014, they're referencing what was mentioned in the 1979 minutes. The other thing I want to clarify, which is significant, is it was mentioned at the last hearing that there were prick marks by scissors attempting to downplay the fact that Michael was stabbed 87 times in his torso and neck. These marks were indeed stab wounds made by sewing shears, which did puncture his skin and they went into his lungs.
Sir. Sir, again, I don't mean to be insensitive, but we are well aware of the facts of the case. Okay? Is there a last statement you would like to share in closing?
I'm going to make a couple comments.
Please be brief.
Patricia Colombo's desire to be released is not greater than the safety and peace of mind of the public. Let's stop re-victimizing the family and stop re-victimizing the entire community. Before today, this is the first time that I heard anything about Patricia. Has never shown any remorse for even the planning. She refuses to admit to her planning and participation in the murders. And I attached some of this stuff, but in conclusion, let me just say this. Speaking to you as the investigator who 50 years ago witnessed this brutal crime, seen and investigated these savage murders, and on behalf of a society who is not willing to forgive and forget, we vehemently oppose and object to the parole and release of Patricia Colombo. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that testimony. I will also remind that we had received significant opposition in regards to letters for this case. We have reviewed those and discussed those in closed session. Only 2 witnesses are allowed to speak in opposition. And so those 2 witnesses have spoken. Does any board members have any questions for opposition? Excuse me. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. We have one more. Thank you for that correction. Okay, sir.
I'll try to make a brief.
Apologies. Would we be able to take a quick break for Ms. Colombo to use the bathroom?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Would we be able to take a quick break for Ms. Colombo to use the bathroom?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Everybody, we're going to take a brief recess, and then we'll reconvene once Ms. Colombo comes back to the screen. And so with that, we'll take a recess. All right, thank you for your patience. We will go ahead and reconvene. And sir, if you'd like to state your name. Hold it. There we go. Hold it down. Now it's on. Now it's on.
Tigrit. I'm the nephew of Frank and Mary Colombo and cousin of Michael. I've been fighting with this my entire life. What she did to our family, not only to her family but to our family, is beyond words. My Uncle Frank was a happy, successful guy, just treated everybody with great respect, loved sports, loved bowling, was very good at it, encouraged me to get into sports, and I miss him every day, but he.
My apologies, sir. Your mic has gone out. It's back on now. It's back on.
It's back off.
It's still on.
Is that okay?
Please continue. Thank you. I'm sorry, sir. One moment.
Try this one.
Thank you.
Thank you. But just a kind person. I mean, he would treat waitresses when we were out to eat with the same respect and fun happiness that he would treat a president of a bank. He was a wonderful man, and he was taken from me very, very early. My Auntie Mary, she was a Southern Belle from Augusta, Georgia, and basically raised my mother. When we got the phone call that all 3 of them had died, my mom literally hit the floor. She hit the ground, and we couldn't figure out how 3 people could die all at the same time. A horrible car accident. How could this have possibly happened? And as time went on, the truth came out, but super sweet lady. And the fact that she was cowering in her bathroom, hearing the love of her life be viciously tortured. They tortured them. She didn't deserve that, and I can't even believe that the death penalty wasn't available back then. If it was, Patty wouldn't be talking to us right now, because it was that horrible. We used to do pretty much everything with them. Over the weekends, we'd go to Elk Grove, or they'd come out to the country. We rode mini bikes together, and Michael was basically my best friend. And for her to stand over him and stab him 100 times, it's just beyond words. I think that she knows she needs to stay in jail. I think Frank DeLuca admitted to the fact that he should probably never be released back in, I think, in 14. There's no possible way that somebody that could plan such a vicious murder for 8 months and then go through with it in such a horrific manner should ever be released. And I can't imagine anybody thinking that's a good idea. I can't beg you enough to make sure she stays where she belongs. She got 300-year sentences for a 1,000-year sentence. I think she should do at least half of her sentence, and that would be fair. And that'll never bring back my wonderful family, but it would at least be a little bit of a payback for something that an animal did. It should clearly a vicious animal. I'm so sorry. And Ray has been through this thing the whole 50 years, and I mean, he has to probably wakes up with nightmares of the blood and the crime scene and the smell, and just it's such a horrible scene. And I feel so bad for him to have to stomach that the rest of his life. And unfortunately, he went in, but it was a blessing to me and my family, because we would have been there that Saturday morning. And if we walked in and saw that, it would have been all over. So I want to thank you, and please don't ever release her. She doesn't deserve to be in society. Please.
Thank you, sir, for that testimony. Is there any questions from any board members before we go to rebuttal statement for the opposition? Okay, we'll come to that in a moment. Ms. White Domain, would you like to make a brief rebuttal statement? I don't see it on yet. There it is.
Just briefly, with regard to former Detective Rose's statements, and I've said this, but just to be very clear, we do not disagree that Ms. Colombo was involved in the planning of this case. We also obviously don't disagree that she was there on the day of the murder and that she participated in these actions. She participated in the murders of her family members. It's true that she doesn't remember exactly what actions that she took, and that she cannot recount exactly what actions that she took. But we do admit that she was involved both in this extensive planning process and in the physical murders that happened. I don't think that's the same thing as saying that Mr. DeLuca didn't know what was going on. But I also want to say there's been a lot of evidence of domestic violence in this case. We don't believe that everything that happened is the fault of Mr. DeLuca. So that is the context of what's happening. But to be very clear, Ms. Colombo takes responsibility for the planning, and those conversations mostly happened when he was not physically present, when Mr. DeLuca was not physically present, and we agree with that. Grief is obviously can be, and certainly in this case, is a lifelong process. And what happened in this case is undeniably horrific. But the question is not a question today of whether she should serve time. She has served now almost 50 years for what happened. in 1976. And I think it matters how she's lived those years, how she's lived those past 50 years. And I think we have a lot of evidence about how she's lived those years that I hope this board would take into effect. It's also true that we are now beholden to the statute that passed in 2025 that requires us to look at these specified statutory factors when granting, when determining whether to grant a parole case like this one. Only one of those factors has to do with the petitioner's participation in the offense. And the statute provides that no one factor shall be determinative. So I would just urge the board and encourage the board to recognize not only her taking of responsibility with regard to that factor of her participation, but that every other factor is either neutral or weighs in favor of her release. And lastly, I'll just ask one question of Mr. Johnson, if that's okay.
Sure.
Mr. Johnson, in your professional opinion, do you believe that Ms. Colombo is rehabilitated?
Absolutely.
And do you believe Ms. Colombo is a danger to the community?
Absolutely not.
Thank you for that testimony. Does any board members have any comments or would like to share?
I do. Good afternoon or good morning. I want to thank the roughly 70 people who came here today in support of Patricia Colombo. When I first looked at this case and had the opportunity to visit with Ms. Colombo, I was deeply struck by the level of sexual abuse that she had encountered from the ages of 7 to 12, and the subsequent grooming of Ms. Colombo by Frank DeLuca starting at the age of 16, the alienation she faced on her family while she was being groomed by him, and the devastation that he wreaked on her life that led to the ultimate tragic events that resulted in the loss of her family. I looked at her as a victim, and she is and has been a victim. She also committed and participated in some of the most heinous crimes that this board has ever encountered. And in the course of evaluating this case, I have been increasingly struck by the opposition and the fear that they continue to maintain should she be released in a county that's adjoining the county that these crimes were committed. Regardless of the outcome, I would encourage everyone here to continue to advocate for the victims of sexual abuse and to make sure they have the resources and the support to overcome that abuse and become productive members of society. Thank you again for being here.
Mr. Coates,
Thank you. Ms. Toronos?
I have a question. What reports did you review, sir, when you conducted this assessment and utilized the tools that you spoke of? Were you able to review past submission of packets and the present one the council submitted on behalf of Ms. Colombo?
I reviewed a myriad of information that was previous and current that was considered at this hearing, I believe everything I had.
Yeah, we provided everything that I submitted, and then I also provided the prisoner review board file that I received from you all. I provided the disciplinary card in the past summary of the en banc. I believe we have going back to 2014 or 2017. I provided that to Mr. Johnson as well.
Oh, so that included all the clinical information, the psychological, and that was any information that was clinical as well, correct?
There's not a wealth of clinical information regarding Ms. Colombo. I believe the clinical evaluation that you all had requested to be done is confidential. So
Yes, so I didn't know if you had shared that. That was my question.
I wasn't able to, yeah.
Okay, all right. Without her permission, you weren't able to release it. Understood. Okay, that is one clarifying question. The second one is, did Ms. Colombo, you can answer, counsel, participate in formal therapy beyond the clergy conversation talk therapy that she has shared?
No, so that was a counseling by a psychiatrist. So the first counseling I'm forgetting her name, but by a sister. She was both a sister and a mental health provider. So it was Christian-based counseling, but it was therapy as well. And then the second And that was the earliest and I think most intensive therapy that she went through. We couldn't remember exactly how long she went through that for, but it was about a year. So that was by a mental health provider. And the second part of therapy was, to your point, strictly Christian counseling therapy.
And what years were those? I just want to confirm that is she still involved or did she stop?
No, she stopped. So the first year or so that she was in therapy with the sister, who was also a psychologist, I believe, but Ms. Colombo can correct me, was in the 90s. So that was quite a long time ago. And the second bout of counseling was sometime in the 2000s, although I'm not totally sure. And we can ask if that's helpful to you.
Okay.
I'm sure Ms. Colombo might remember the dates. Yeah. Ms. Colombo, do you remember, can you remind me, I'm sorry, the name of the sister who you did counseling with, and was she an LCSW or was she a psychologist?
She was, I believe she was a psychologist. Her name was Sister Margaret Burke, and she had also been the dean of Loyola University in Chicago. She was, we acquired her through attorney Margaret Burke. I'm sorry, Margaret Byrne, who, along with Sister Margaret Traxler, wanted me to seek. We all had agreed I needed counseling, but there wasn't a lot of availability at Dwight at that time with mental health. And so Sister Burke came in once a week for about a year and a half for some very intensive counseling, and it would have continued. However, she passed away.
And was that, Ms. Colombo, was that in the 1990s, do we think?
I want to think, I think it was more in the late 80s, mid-late 80s.
And do you remember the one-on-one Christian counseling that you did with Becky Funk? When did that happen, if you can remember?
That was around 2008, and that continued on and off until about 2 years ago, because Miss Funk had moved to, well, actually it was about 4 years ago, I apologize, because Miss Funk had left the state and moved to Florida for a short time.
Thank you.
All right, that I wanted to raise awareness on her clinical services she received, and also to determine if she's going to continue to receive some intensive therapy if she remains or if she returns to community, considering the facts of the case and her struggles. And by note, she's been reflecting on what happened and has come more now, most recently, to a conclusion with some additional details. And I was wondering if that was accompanied by the therapeutic intervention that she was involved in. So, but I'm not going to assume, but she will continue with clinical intervention services upon return or remaining in IDOC?
Absolutely. So she's not in services now. I think if different services, specifically more trauma-intensive services, were available, that might be different. But we fortunately have a number of programs, including obviously trauma-specific, domestic violence-specific programming that she's able to take advantage of upon her release. Yes, definitely.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments or discussion from board members? Okay, before I go to Mr. Boland for his motion, I just want to thank everyone for being here today and being part of this process, as well as for the behalf as well as the opposition. Mr. Boland.
Okay. I believe there's no question that Ms. Colombo has availed herself of opportunities to invest in her own rehabilitation since becoming incarcerated. That appears to have resulted in positive outcomes in the form of a remarkable disciplinary record and an incredible investment in her own personal faith, as well as supporting access to Christian counseling and worship opportunities for others at Logan over the years. She should be commended for her efforts in that regard. That said, her journey toward accountability and genuine remorse has been more complicated, with many aspects of her involvement in the crime being denied as recently as her last interviews in 2024, leaving an undeniable impact and harm to family and community unresolved over time. It appears it has taken most of the 50 years to be able to admit the personal responsibility and premeditated intent regarding this unfortunate and admittedly heinous execution of the family. That fact can't be dismissed easily. This board continues to have a very difficult decision to make. After considering all statutory factors, my motion is to deny at this time.
Okay, motion's been made to deny parole. Is there a second?
Second. So moved.
That's been seconded by Mr. Heaton. Please call the vote.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Miss Buckley, Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Heaton,
Yes.
Miss Lemons,
Yes.
Miss Schaffner,
Yes.
Ms. Tarones, Mr. Tupy, Mr. Coates,
Yes. The vote of 9-0. That motion passes. Parole is denied. And just bear with us for a moment as we transition to the next case. Yeah, is there discussion for a set?
That's what I'm asking. Should we entertain any discussion?
I can waive her appearance if you'll allow it.
Okay. You want to get it back on? Okay. All right. Yeah, well, I need to get it back on.
Our attorney just said should waive her.
I can waive her appearance if you'll allow it.
Is that acceptable?
Okay. All right. For clarification, sorry about that, everybody. We are continuing the discussion on the case of Ms. Colombo to discuss a set. Her attorney, Ms. White Domain, has waived her presence for this portion of it. So I will go ahead and open the discussion.
Excuse me.
Okay. Yes, we'll send that. She'll send that in writing. Okay. She's going to waive it, but it needs to be in writing. Okay. So we will proceed. Is there any discussion on a set?
I will gladly entertain any discussion or a motion from another member if they feel strongly. I got the impression that there was some desire to discuss this further.
I would move for a 5-year set.
It's a motion on the table for a 5-year set. Is there a second? Seeing none. So as there's no second, that motion fails. That motion will fail. Would anyone like to make another motion?
I'll move for a 3-year set.
Okay. Motion is now on the table for a 3-year set. Is there a second? It's seconded by Mr. Grubbs. Please call the vote.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Miss Buckley, Mr. Grubbs,
Yes.
Mr. Heaton,
No.
Miss Lemons,
Yes.
Miss Schaffner,
No.
Miss Tarones,
No.
Mr. Tupy, Mr. Coates,
No. With a vote of 4 to 5, that motion fails. Okay. All right, no other discussion? Okay. All right, that is conclusion of this case. Thank you for everybody for your patience.
Who else is totally stunned? I mean, I was shocked seeing this. Illinois always surprises me. I know they have a reputation for being really soft on crime, but the parole hearings are not exactly what you'd expect. A unanimous denial. She somehow lost 2 votes over the past 2 years after showing up in person. And not only that, but they didn't even want to give her another set. I mean, by default, the law requires that she will get another chance in 5 years, but they didn't even want to vote for her to get another shot. That's how poorly she did in this hearing. Now, I do have some questions about it because it certainly seems like it was predetermined. I mean, the chair pulls out a pre-printed piece of paper with the reasons for denial. So unless he has one paper speech for denial and another paper speech to grant, which I would love to know. I need to know if that's the case, because otherwise the entire thing is nothing more than a show trial, so to speak, right? I mean, so I would love to know that. I think they must have, but how can you have, I don't know. It's weird. Come on, guys. Am I the only one that's lost on that? How do you have, how is it written? How is it typed out? And he reads off why she shouldn't get paroled. What's the point of the hearing? So, um, unless that was just always his stance, and then people could have voted against it. But again, that's his, I don't know. Okay, maybe I'm harping on that too much. But where is she now? She is, how old is she? So her co-defendant died in 2023 at age 84. That's Frank DeLuca. And um she is, hold on, let me see if I can pull it up here. Sir Richard has so much research on this case. And the thing is, I just don't know. I don't really know, like, if it's just redundant to go over it. We've also been here for so long that I I don't really know what there is to go through that would be new to this case. I don't think I'm going to review, although there's so much. I mean, I got to show you, Sir Richard just has so much. There are so many articles, there are documentaries, there are shows on this. This is like, again, it's interesting. It's like one of the biggest family annihilator cases that has a lot of coverage, but yet I had never heard of this case until it came up for parole. And so where do we start? Okay, so a few things, I guess. One is, who else was really ticked off when the chair interrupted the detective, the police officer, when he was, by the way, 6 minutes into his statement? And that pissed me off. It pissed me off, especially being that the right before him, the advocate for a release got how long? Like 30 something minutes of blabbering on about pretty much nothing. And then the detective's going to come, and you know that he's a great orator. You know that he's like, this is, he comes all the way here. This is part of his life statement, like his life mission. And you're going to interrupt him. It's just like, shame on you. Shame on you, really. I mean, look, they voted unanimously against. So, you know, but still, it's like, what are you doing? Why are you shutting him up? And the the expert that they brought, who worked in the prison systems and now has a non-for-profit that he does, and you know, it's like there's I guess a few things about that. He had one job, right? He had one job to write a report to submit to the board for this parole hearing. Who knows how much they paid him to do this? And maybe he's not paid at all, but I'm just, you know, and they say that that there, and it seems that the report was messed up, right? That was my understanding of it. It was he handed them a report that seemed to differ from the report, and like they had to clarify that. Which, could you just imagine? I mean, it's like you have one job and you mess it up so bad that you have to clarify it. And it said the hard copy assessment was a -27, and an 8, which differs from the previous hearing, and they had to talk about that. Now, I don't know if this is accurate, but I did a search, and it seems that the for a woman, the lowest possible score that you can get is 24. So if my research is correct, uh, she somehow scored three scores lower than the possible score rating, and it just makes we all know that the whole score rating thing is a joke, and the way that they even take it because like how many years have you been locked up, how many programs have you done? Clearly there is something much bigger here that we weren't being let in on, where there's something mentally wrong going on with her. And I thought the one of the board members called it out quite well. He said, did you, this risk assessment expert get any reports on her mental health? And then she goes, no, we didn't. And he said, oh, is it because she didn't give you permission? Did you catch that, guys? They purposely withheld the mental reports from this expert who's going to assess risk, and then tried to play it off like they weren't allowed to because it's confidential. But that's not it. All she had to do was give permission. All Patricia had to do was say, sure, he can look at it. And she refused to. And they tried to pull like a quick one. And there must be something really damning in that report. No kidding. I mean, she stabbed her brother like 87 times. Who would think that there might be something going on here? It might be a bit of psychopathy, or, it probably ranks out so that is probably the deciding factors, that she still ranks not on the voodoo charts, which this expert talks about, low risk assessment. We all know how the Mandoo family feels about the risk assessments. It all is just, a joke, a gimmick to try to expedite the release of prisoners. And it's all a bunch of manipulation. It's all a bunch of hocus pocus, in my opinion. But the mental report, she can't hide. And that's my guess. I'm just speculating on a situation like this. As Dr. Grande says, that would be my guess, that it is so bad, so horrific, that the board is still afraid of letting her out. Think about that. I mean, yeah, she was sentenced 200 to 300 years in prison. And this, I saw a Facebook post. Someone, posted about her getting denied parole with her picture. And someone said, well, it looks like she's about 296, so she'll be getting out soon anyways. And I actually, I think she looks fine for her age, but it wasn't a good picture. But she looks scary. Like there is still something in her eyes and her mannerisms, and it's like it's something uncanny. There's something like scary about it to me. And not to mention that she still has no remorse comes through the screen, no empathy, no forget even tears. We didn't even come close to that. I mean, you forget that, like, here she is trying to get a chance of free, and there's just like, and and kind of like how we're so used to with the programs and the AA, and you find out that she hasn't even done personal therapy since at best like the late 80s. Like what? What? I mean, what else you like? And I do like how the investigator, the former detective, brought up the fact that, hey, for the prior hearing, there are minutes that she did have, this sex ring. And I believe that she absolutely did. Like, it's not like a rumor just poofed out of nowhere. And people were fired for like the whole thing. And you hear about the nephew who's still so attached. And see, he has no problem breaking down in tears. Like for him, he can break down, right? Because he's a human. He's not a lizard humanoid. But when it comes to the one who actually sat there and saw it and heard the screams and the blood, and it's like there's no one home. There's no one home. It's just so funny. All those in support with the Innocence Project and all the standing behind her with a combination of 350 years of knowing her, and she's such a good person, And it's like, and they keep trying these different strategies. I mean, she didn't come in with like a Lego set again. She didn't say, hey, look at this, look at these finger sock puppets I made to talk about, abuse. And it's also what it is that it's a mockery of all those. See, we're aware, our eyes are open. How many times do we see little ones getting totally horrifically abused, but they don't go and murder their family because of that? And you're like trying to use that as a reason for why she murdered her family, annihilated them. No, she annihilated them because she wanted the money. And they try to make it like she was the one manipulated, but no, she clearly manipulated him. She told her co-defendant, yes, yes, he's a horrible guy. Yes, he's a disgusting nitwit. Yes, he's all those things. He's just as a monster as she is. But she told him that her father was mafia and her father was going to have him killed. And he believed it because he was 39 years old. Somehow the schmuck believed it. And he was manipulated by her to go and kill them. And she was the one that exercised all the brutality on the murder at least that we believe. So, I don't know if she'll live another 5 years. Sure she will. Evil always lives a long time, right? But I don't think that we will see her again on this channel. What do you guys think? There's I don't think there's anything that we need to go through details of the case that we haven't heard already. So I think that with that, I'll just let you go. Thank you, Sir Richard, for all the research. There's so much on this case. It's really like unlimited. And thank you for connecting the dots. We have many more. We have a playlist for Illinois if you want to see more from Illinois. And with that, I'll let you go.
These murders obtained national attention and news coverage then, and they still do today. So it is worth spending some time to show you that Patricia Colombo spent 8 months planning the murder of her family.
And for her to stand over him and stab him 100 times, there's no possible way that somebody that could plan such a vicious murder for 8 months and then go through with it in such a horrific manner. She got 300-year sentences for a 1,000-year sentence. I think she should do at least half of her sentence, and that would be fair.